Alright, this little video is about how to calculate your running zones, heart rate and pace, and input it into our team, into your spreadsheet, and into Training Peaks. So there's two ways to do this. Let's go through method one. Use a 30-minute run time trial. Basically, you go warm up, run 30 minutes like you're racing. You do this on your own, not at a race. You come home. You open your swim, bike, run zones spreadsheet as usual. Oops. Yeah, you'll save your own copy, which will look like this. The tab here is run zones, the last tab at the bottom. And when you do your 30-minute time trial, just like with your bike time trial, you're going to hit your lap button 10 minutes in, and then calculate your average heart rate for the last 20 minutes, which, let's try this again. Calculate your heart rate for the last 20 minutes, which is your run threshold. My run threshold heart rate is quite high. I would guess it's somewhere around 185. So that's going to set my steady Ironman zone somewhere around 158 to 168, which is about right. When I'm strong, like in an Ironman, I can hold 160 for the first half. Then if I'm having a good day, I can push it up to the mid to high 160s by the end. So this gives me my zones to follow when I'm training. I can follow the directions of my workouts. And of course, the next step is to go to Training Peaks. You go into your settings. And zones. And we want to go to run zones. And okay, we're in run zones. And we're going to input 185. Oh, that's what I already have in there, but let's just 185. And calculation methods. We want Joe Friel for running. Give us the same results. And it's hidden down here, but don't forget to click save. And then one last thing we want to do while we're here is pace zones. So whatever your average pace was for the whole time trial, let's say I was able to average 6 minutes per mile. Here it is. Input 6 minutes per mile. Calculation methods. Joe Friel for running, threshold speed, and let's see. And so he's saying if my threshold's 6 minutes per mile, my zone 2 is going to be around a 744 per mile to 650. That looks a little aggressive to me, but the purpose of these zones isn't necessarily for us. It's just so Training Peaks has our zones so it can sort of do its magical calculations to calculate our run training stress score and all these other cool things that can go on behind the scenes when you decide to geek out over your running, or on occasion if I decide to geek out over your running. So that's the first way of setting your zones. And now we know your heart rate zones. We've input them into Training Peaks. We've input your pace zones into Training Peaks. So another way, another option for you is to go ahead and do a running race, something that's going to take you 30 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes. Probably the closer to an hour you can get, the better. So let's say I decided to do a 10K. And to come home from the 10K, I want to go to the Macmillan calculator, macmillanrunning.com. Go to the calculator. There's a link in this web post. And let's say I decided to do a 10K, and I ended up doing 37 minutes. And let's see what he tells me. So right here you put in your times, and he'll give you what your equivalent performance would be at other distances. Obviously, using a 10K to predict a marathon it's a little bit of dicey stuff. Um, but using a 10K to predict maybe a 10 miler, you're on a little bit safer ground. But so what I'm doing here though, and it also gives me some training paces down here that I think are pretty helpful. But what I'm doing here is I'm trying to find out what pace would I be predicted to hold for about an hour, and saying that I'd be able to run 15K here just under an hour in 6:09, where I'd be able to run 10 miles at just over an hour at 6:12. So it looks like I'll be able to hold about 6:11 per hour, and 6:11 per mile for an hour. So that's about my threshold pace. And so when I felt better, I'd write that down on a little piece of paper. 6:11 per hour. I recover from my 10K. Somewhere along the line, I want to run. For 20 minutes at 6:11 per hour, and at the very end, in the last minute, I want to look at that heart rate monitor on my wrist and see what my heart rate is, and that's what I'm going to use for my threshold heart rate. So I got that threshold heart rate. I put it in here. So I put the threshold heart rate. In here, let's say it's 185. Do it, save it, and we already have our pace zones. We said it was 6:11 per mile, so pace zones, scroll up here, 6:11 per mile. Show reel for running, threshold speed, click, get our pace zones. Okay, and that, I believe, just about wraps it up. But one more thing, actually, if you have a run race result that I think is actually pretty helpful, is to look at your Macmillan long, down here, your long run paces, or even your recovery jogs paces. So I like to use this as a range, say, for me, right around from a 7:08 to an 8:08 as my steady zone, or even up to 8:38. Being somewhere in there, I know I'm going to get a good aerobic benefit. If I'm having a good day, I might run right down here close to a 7:08 for my steady zones. If I'm feeling a little rusty, I might run closer to 8:08, but this 7:08 to 8:08 long run zones what I like to use for my steady runs. And this concludes our video on calculating your run zones and inputting them into Training Peaks. This has been quite a fun time, but sorry to say, all good things must come to an end.